Come see us do stand-up in Baltimore, Hartford, Syracuse, Atlantic City, Levittown, New York, Cohoes, New York, Providence, Rhode Island, and San Jose, California. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for the tickets. This happened last night. It's strange how the Democrats, liberals, who are now illiberals, have gone from being staunch defenders of free speech to being staunch defenders of censorship and authoritarian fascists in that way. And then now they've also become pro-war. And here's Donald Trump calling it out last night with Elizabeth Warren. Let's watch.
With no end in sight, the United States has sent hundreds of billions of dollars to support Ukraine's defense, with no security, with no anything.
So now those are Democrats applauding that they're just endlessly supporting a proxy war that has been instigated by NATO, the West, and Americans' economic hitmen. Well, watch, it goes on.
Do you want to keep it going for another 5 years? Yeah. You would say Pocahontas says yes.
But Pocahontas says yes sounds like if Disney Animation did porn. Anyway, she puts the poke back in Pocahontas. But let's watch her clap. And there she goes. And there she's just clapping along, because my theory is her mighty native bloodline. She knows intuitively that if the tribal leader says something, you can't beat him. You should join him. That's what I think is happening there. So that's Elizabeth Warren clapping like a seal for the war machine. And she's supposed to be, some big liberal champion. And there's Trump calling her out for it. And it's so easy for Donald Trump to get to the left of these people because they're all authoritarian tools of war. And here's Bernie Sanders just yesterday. He tweeted this out. For 250 years, the United States has supported democracy, which is laughable, especially what we know now about USAID and the NED. I mean, we've all known that, but now regular people are getting to know that stuff. He says now in the middle of a horrific war that Putin started, again, he's being ahistorical. Trump is turning his back on Ukraine and democracy. Democracy. Ukraine is not a democracy. It's now a dictatorship. He's outlawed the opposing political parties. He's outlawed the opposing any skeptical or critical media. He's killed and jailed journalists like Gonzalo Lera.
American
journalists. That's right. And it was so egregious that he got community noted on Twitter. It said, even under Obama in 2015, the United States was providing weapons and or military training to 73% of the world's dictatorships. As classified by Freedom House, the U.S. is the #1 supporter of dictatorships in the world. And so just to let you know, I just want the listeners, here's the leading scholar, international scholar, Mersheimer, and he's going to tell you what Trump is doing in Ukraine is the right thing.
I mean, he has no real option here other than to go along with what President Trump wants. And as you and I have said on countless occasions, actually what Trump wants is what's best for Ukraine. Zelensky doesn't realize that, and most Ukrainians don't realize that. But what Trump wants to do is shut down the war as soon as possible. And that is in Ukraine's interest. It's not in Ukraine's interest to continue this war. And although Zelensky thinks that's the case, he's just dead wrong. So in a very important way, I think that what Trump wants to do is good for Ukraine.
So, I mean, even here, Primo Radical shows you that the people in Ukraine want their elections. Then Zelensky won't give them an election. And he says, since when does criminalizing opposition and canceling elections equals democracy? So how did this, again, my question is the same as before. It's a little different. How did liberals go from being staunch anti-war, anti-CIA, anti-war machine to being people who are sitting there applauding endless war, which we all know now is a proxy war that was instigated by NATO in the West.
I mean, it's amazing. You just think about the difference between now and the Bush years, when the average American liberal actually agreed with the Colin Powell position that you can't go in to a war without a clear objective. You break it, you own it. There has to be a goal. Soldiers need a goal. Right, and we can't just go to war just to do it. And Ukraine is it's a slightly different situation because it was a country that was invaded, right? But this is a situation that can't be won militarily. Barack Obama made this exact same decision in not going to Crimea for the very sensible reason that it was always going to have be more important or to Putin than that area is going to be to us. And so they're not going to lose that war. Like Russia is not going to be defeated in this conflict. Ukraine can't defend itself at all by itself. So what we're being asked to do is to support in perpetuity an incredibly bloody, dangerous war that not only involves a huge loss of life in Ukraine, but puts us in real jeopardy of getting into a global conflict with a nuclear power. And what's so funny is that when you mention that now, that's called a Russian talking point. If you bring up the nuclear clock, which has been part of American society since the 50s or 60s. That's now called a Russian talking point. Worrying about nuclear war is a Russian talking point. It's a Putin talking point. But it's true. Like we had NATO countries firing missiles into Russian territory, and only because they decided not to expand the situation are we not in some kind of a shooting war with a nuclear power. It's astonishing to me that people I marched with, I remember in 2002 against the Iraq War, are so for this. They're rabidly for this, and it's a mystery to me. I mean, is it to you? I mean,
it just shows you how weak-minded people who I used to think weren't are. People who I thought would be able to see through the war machine, the censorship machine, and Trump broke their brain, and that's just, there's no two ways around it. Trump broke their brain, and so now anything that they can, if Trump said he liked vanilla ice cream, they would say vanilla ice cream is Putin ice cream, and that's it. Look what happened with COVID. I mean, they became they went from being my body, my choice, and to people used to protest GMOs in their food. We're now wanting to take your kids away if you didn't want to inject them with an experimental medical treatment with no long-term studies. They wanted you to lose your job. They wanted you to lose the right of travel if you wouldn't take this big pharma product. So they're no longer they're not for bodily autonomy anymore. They're pro-abortion. You've seen that shift. I've seen it. They say which is like being pro-amputation. Like I'm pro-choice. Being pro-abortion is a dark thing. There's no way around that. And so, yeah, that's, to me, it's just Trump derangement syndrome. But, the fact that Bernie Sanders, it's like, is someone else writing your tweets? I mean, what? So he was never what we thought he was. I mean, Elizabeth Warren, I didn't know much about, but Bernie Sanders, he used to start every speech with "sounds like you're ready for a revolution," and he turns into Lindsey Graham. I mean, it's just like at the snap of a finger, and he doesn't have any shame, and it turns out he has no dignity, and at all. I mean, at all. If you're willing to do that. There's no bigger. I mean, I don't want to be hyperbolic, but that's scum of the earth activity when you're cheering on the slaughter of innocent Ukrainians for an economic hitman's war, in Ukraine. That's so. There are no leaders in the Democratic Party. That's what there is no point to the Democratic Party, but we're not ruled by parties. We're ruled by oligarchs, and they control both parties, and they can't control Trump as much, and that's why they tried to kill him twice. That's why they russiagated him, impeached him twice, and did January 6th, and then did 92 felony indictments, right, while George Bush walks the earth a free man. So that, to me, that's it's again, I turn to you because you're a much smarter, wiser, more educated man by myself. I'm a nightclub comedian, and I just is there a way out of this? Like, how the Democrat, there's just no snapping these people out of it.
Yeah, I don't know. First of all, I would gladly trade places with you and be a nightclub comedian, but that sounds like a much better job to me. But no, I mean, you bring up Bernie. Bernie is probably the politician that I know best personally of any in the world. In 2006, he invited me to spend the better part of a month following him around in Congress. He never once asked to be off the record, I've had dinner with him socially. He's gone out with my family. I had an image of him that was, I guess, completely different from the reality, or I'm just confused about this recent turn. There's only one explanation that I can really come up with, because my impression of Bernie always was that he was a person of integrity. I thought he was doing these things not for money, not for fame, not for the usual politician reasons. But I did have a conversation with him once where he said some interesting things about kind of his affection for the Democratic Party, and he talked sort of very passionately about what it meant to him when he was a kid, growing up in poor in Brooklyn, and how nobody he knew was a Republican. Everybody he knew was a Democrat, and Joe Biden had been a friend of his when he got to the Senate. From the House, Biden had been a mentor to him, told him how the place worked. And I think there is a part of him deep inside that believes, kind of in the classic lefty way, in party politics, right? In other words, party before self, in a way that Americans don't really associate with. That's the only rational explanation I can come up with for a lot of this stuff, because on so many other issues, Bernie, and he will say this openly, that he and Trump were really mining the same territory politically in both 2016 and 2020. But now he's just gone over into this red baiting, sort of John Brennan style version of what the Democratic Party is. And there's no other way I can account for it. Can you? I mean, I don't know.
No, it just reveals the worst. He would have been much better if he got out of politics after 2020, because his legacy is just garbage now. He's just turned into the thing he's used to be fighting against, and he is the monster. There's really no other way to put it. And he was so close too. That's the funny thing about it. He had them by the short and curlies. He really did. Yeah, but, and he could have demanded things. He could have extracted concessions. If he had a little bit of Matt Gaetz in him, he could have did something. But he doesn't. He doesn't have that in him. And I've had other people. I've seen Michael Parente talk about Bernie Sanders and how after the bombing of Kosovo, he stopped talking to Michael Parente and things like so. Bernie's always been kind of a cuck to the war machine in a way, and it's that is just disgusting. That's John Brennan stuff. That's not stuff you would expect from somebody who calls himself a progressive or represents the working man or anything. It's all the anti that. Right. Every bomb that's produced, every gun is taking as Eisenhower said it's taking a meal out of a poor kid's mouth, and it's just, and he doesn't care about any of it. I don't know what he's doing. He's trying to not be, well, as he told Chris Hedges, I don't want to end up like Ralph Nader. And now Ralph Nader saying the same stupid shit that Bernie's saying. It's just, it's amazing. Ralph Nader still thinks that there's communism in Russia. Did you see his latest tweet? It was.
Oh, I didn't see that. What did he say?
Yeah, he's saying.
It drives me crazy when people say that. What did he say?
Yeah, he was referring to Russia as a communist, and it was just like, dude, what? I don't, but and. I almost tweeted about it. I almost said whoever's running his Twitter account should be fired, but I just let it go. And it's.
I mean, that's a 40-year-old error. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's been a while, or 30 years, or whatever. It's been 30 a while.
Years. Yeah.
Yeah.
Since they tore down the wall, and since the vulture capitalists took over in Russia. Hey, the IRS is the largest tax collection agency in the world. And with April 15th fast approaching, it's more aggressive than ever. In 2025, enforcement is ramped up, and if you owe back taxes or unfiled returns, waiting is not an option. The longer you do, the worse it gets. Ignoring your tax troubles is the worst thing you can do. April 15th marks another tax year that has passed you by. Getting ahead of this is the smart move, but never contact the IRS alone. That's a fact. Instead, let the experts at Tax Network USA handle it for you. Why? Because not all tax resolution companies are the same. Tax Network USA has a preferred direct line to the IRS, meaning they know exactly which agents to deal with and which to avoid. With proven strategies to settle tax problems in your favor, whether you owe $10,000 or $10 million, Tax Network USA's attorney and negotiators have already resolved over $1 billion in tax debt. Talk with one of their strategists today. It's free to talk to them. Stop the threatening letters, stop looking over your shoulder, and protect yourself from property seizures and bank levies. Don't let the IRS control your future. Call 1-800-958-1000 or visit tnusa.com/Jimmy. April 15th is just around the corner. Act now before the IRS acts first. Come see us do stand-up in Baltimore, Hartford, Syracuse, Atlantic City, Levittown, New York, Cohoes, New York, Providence, Rhode Island, and San Jose, California. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for the tickets.